Hi, everybody. Bill Rudman here again from the Musical Theater Project. And with me is Bob Knoll, who, as you know by now, is communications professor at John Carroll University. Tonight we're talking about the musical 1776, which hopefully you have all seen by now. And if you're new to this series, it's called Let's Go to the Movies at Home. So take a minute to read your instructions on the screen so you will know how to participate in our session. Bob and I are so proud of the movies we have shared so far. All of them are classics, so I just have to tell you again that they are Royal Wedding, Easter Parade, 42nd Street, and American in Paris, and Guys and Dolls. Pretty terrific. And now comes 1776. This is a 1972 film. It follows the Broadway musical that was produced in 1969 very closely. Last time, lots of you asked questions, or this is just as good, lots of you made comments. If you're a bit shy, as I am, just type out something and send it to chat, and it's going to get to us. We're sharing this movie close to the 4th of July for obvious reasons, and because on July 3rd, you can see Lin-Manuel Miranda's movie version of Hamilton on Disney+. And most important, we're sharing it because 1776 could not be more timely given the horrific events of recent weeks. Anyway, welcome back, Bob Knoll.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. This is a movie that we both really love, and I think it's got, like you said, a lot to say, and it's also highly entertaining too. That's one of the great things about the film.
Yeah, right. It's both, and I've been given instructions by Debbie to say that you guys are now allowed to unmute yourselves. Although it helps if you
I don't know.
It helps if you stay muted until you talk. Okay, that's that. So, as Bob just kind of suggested, this is a movie that is really much admired by millions of people. We know some of you, including our friend Jody Maley, some of you watch this movie every year at this time. To get things going, Bob and I decided we're going to be a little bossy. So we hope that doesn't get us into trouble. We're going to be bossy and do something that we've never done before. Namely, in my intro, I mentioned that Peter Stone and Sherman Edwards, who wrote 1776, they said they were always being asked, but is it true? Did it really happen this way? And their answer was always, yes, it is true, though we took some dramatic license. And as Stone said, I love this quote, Stone said, God writes lousy theater. Yeah,
Bill and I are not historians.
Probably true. So, right.
Bill and I aren't historians, but the first thing we want to do is take around 4 minutes to tell you what we do know, or think we know, because even the historians disagree on some of the facts about 1776.
Anyway, assuming you want to know what's true, Bob and I are going to do a little rapid fire exercise. So then we can, after that, we can move on to the ideas of the musical. What's most inspiring about this musical, as our colleague Jody Maley Kirk says, is this musical's vision of America and the principles upon which it was founded.
And if you're still not satisfied with our true and false rundown, we're going to suggest you go to Wikipedia later. Wikipedia. Even though we don't usually recommend Wikipedia for the musical theater, because they do make lots of mistakes. Lots of mistakes. But the 1776 film has a good entry. Even historians, though, disagree on some of the points.
So here we go. Boom, boom, boom. Many of these factoids come to us from Peter Stone and Sherman Edwards, who did a lot of research before they wrote this show. And Bob, take it away.
Okay, Thomas Jefferson did play the violin, and he played it well. That's true.
In the musical, he says he's made plans to release his slaves But as many of you know, that did not happen in his lifetime.
And in fact, Sally Hemings wasn't Jefferson's mistress. She was his property. He owned 607 men, women, and children on Monticello, and he fathered 6 children by Sally.
It's true that John Adams later described himself as obnoxious and disliked.
And as Bill said in the intro, there were no minutes written, were kept for this debate because, of course, it was secret and very dangerous, except for those motions that were passed, of course. So the authors relied on the memories of the members, on many letters and autobiographies of the different participants.
In the song Cool, Cool, Considerate Men, which just always slays me, there's an anachronism when it comes to using language of the political left and the political right, because actually that language was not used until the French Revolution.
Martha Jefferson did not really go to Philadelphia, and she died at age 34, and Thomas Jefferson never remarried.
Unfortunately, the gender stereotypes are real in this film. Even though we see a bit of John Adams' tender side, he was quite Puritan, and he was definitely paternalistic.
Richard Henry Lee's resolution for independency, as he sings in the song, was made on July 2nd. After 3 days of debate, the declaration was approved on July 4th. But all the signings got done over a period of several months. The greatest number of members signed on August the 2nd.
Isn't that amazing? August 2nd. I never, ever knew that until just recently. Caesar Rodney did save the day by coming back to Philadelphia from Dover, which was 80 miles away. He came back on horseback. He was a very sick man who suffered from skin cancer.
In the movie, he was played by an older man, but he was really 36 years old at the time, but dramatic license. There were 86 changes made to the document by the committee, and 400 words were cut, including the so-called slavery clause. And, of course, the Declaration did not grant rights to women or Native Americans.
Though we know Thomas Jefferson was an eloquent writer, this really surprised me. He said hardly a word during the debates. Actually, John Adams said that he never heard him utter 3 sentences together.
There were a bumper crop of horseflies that summer in Philadelphia, so there were gazillions of them in the stable, which was right next to Independence Hall, which is why the windows stayed closed and why they sweated so much.
In his later years, Ben Franklin often did fall asleep in public. That's true.
The New York delegation did abstain on many votes, including the final one on independence, although they approved the action after the fact.
And how about General Washington's dispatches? The musical makes a big deal about that. They arrived on an average of 3 each day during the Second Continental Congress, with most of them very discouraging, even alarming in the news they shared.
In mid-May, the armed forces under Washington's command included only 6,641 troops, men, fit for duty.
John Dickinson, you remember he was the leader of the cool conservative men. He felt he could not endorse the document, but this is really cool. He left the Congress to enlist in the Army as a private, and he served courageously. And in fact, John Dickinson also contributed big time to the writing of the Constitution.
Edward Rutledge of South Carolina was the leading proponent of individual rights for individual states. And it was Rutledge who must be charged with leading the fight against the condemnation of slavery.
It is true, as the musical suggests, that nobody on the committee that was managing the Declaration, nobody wanted to write it. And it is true that John Adams persuaded Thomas Jefferson to write the darn document.
Attempting to persuade the Continental Congress to abolish slavery, Jefferson also said, "The rights of human nature are deeply wounded by this infamous practice."
For those of you who are former English majors, listen to this. Nobody knows whether unalienable as opposed to inalienable was actually agreed on, or whether it was a printer's error to use unalienable. Interestingly, John Adams wanted inalienable.
The young soldier's song, Mama Look Sharp, is an example of dramatic license because it really was about the Battle of Lexington.
The tally board that's up on the wall that you see in the musical, that did not exist in real life.
Not only did the tally board not exist, the calendar didn't exist. That was put upon both on the Broadway production and the movie. It was what we used to say in screenwriting. It was a time lock. It sets that there's a deadline, and you know exactly what day it is, so simply. And of course, having the tally board made it clear too how close they're coming to success. Some congressmen were eliminated on stage and screen altogether. I believe there was 55, 56 members of there during the actual event. And they had to cut it down, of course, for movies and, of course, for Broadway.
And one more, John and Abigail Adams, they were 300 miles apart when the debates were going on. The way their distance is treated in 1776 was inspired by this line that was written by John Adams to Abigail. He wrote, "Oh, if I could only annihilate time and space." And the writers of 1776 found a way to do that. Okay, that's the end of our back and forth. We're going to move on to questions. Bob and I have the first two, and then we're truly going to open up the discussion. We promise you that. But over the past couple of weeks, Bob and I have been thinking a lot. We've been wondering how we would vote if we were members of the Second Continental Congress. And as we were thinking about this, let's assume the language abolishing slavery stayed in, okay? So no worries there. But if that's the given, would we have voted yes or no for independency, as John Adams called it? We're going to tell you what we decided, but how about you guys? Let's take a vote first, okay? And you can see you can do that right now. How many of you would have voted for independency or against independency?
The votes are rolling in. We have 20-some people that have already voted.
20 have already voted.
Yep, we're up to about 27 people have voted. Keep those votes coming.
Okay. While you're voting, Bob, why don't we share how we felt about this question?
Okay, my feeling is I believe I would. Well, especially, of course, in Forsyth, but those brilliant men that are there. And of course, you had George Washington as your leader. And the British at the time were in really bad shape because this king had a lot of problems. If you're ever going to do it, this was the time to do it. So I would have gone with it. How about you, Bill?
To be honest, first I was thinking about, how would I have voted if I had a family? And I decided that I would have voted no. I would not have taken the risk. And then I asked myself, would I have voted for independence in general if I were single in 1776? And again, to be honest, I decided that I would not have had the guts to vote yes. I would have voted no. So have we got a tally, Debbie?
Yes, can you see it?
Oh, yes, I can. So, wow. 82% of you voted yes, and only 18% of you were in my camp voting no. So now let's ask you guys to elaborate on that a little. Those of you who voted yes, some of you tell us why, and same for some of you who voted no. Okay? Bob, do you see?
Yes, we need somebody to raise their hand. Press the little button so that says with your hand waving, so we can call on you. Because right now everybody's mute right now. So, okay, who wants to answer that?
I mean, this is a very important question, you guys, so we
Okay.
got to know.
Ross wants to answer this one first. Okay, go on, Ross.
Well, I mean, as I put in the comments, I mean, it's so easy in hindsight to say yes, but as Ben Franklin says, I mean, nobody had ever done that before. And how do you? What's the model? And yet there have been so much pain inflicted by the British Crown and the King, and so you know, at some point, you feel like enough is enough. But we don't really. We don't necessarily realize how revolutionary it was.
Yeah, that's true. We don't. Yeah.
Okay,
Who else?
Bruce and Judy have a response. Go on, Bruce.
Hey, this was Judy's vote, actually. She said as long as it did not include the section on being against slavery, she's going to vote no. But then I brought up to her after I already had cast the vote that you have to compromise sometimes. And I would have compromised for a yes. I would have compromised so that we could have gotten the yes vote and then changed it, although it took way too long to get it changed.
Okay, Dave's got a comment. Dave?
I was very practical about it. I figured that if I were at that convention, I was there by virtue of some impulse on the part of the people that I represented, and that in light of the concerns from all of the bad things that people attributed to the British Parliament, that this was something that I probably should represent the people in voting yes for independence.
Okay.
Anybody
Pragmatic.
else? Yeah.
Good pragmatism.
Okay.
Who else? Is that all of the people?
That's all, Bill.
That's all. So before we move to the next question that we want to ask you guys, some chat comments are coming in, and we'll share a couple of them with you just as a brushstroke. Ellen Greenberger says that she's never seen either the stage or film version of 1776. She had never seen it, but she loved it, and she was surprised at how funny it was. And she loved the line, "John, not everyone was born in Boston." And John Schinker wants to say to everybody that he had not realized that Ben Franklin actually was born in Boston. So, yeah, and neither had I, John. Bob, you've got a question.
Yes, the question is, let's talk about the problem of this whitewashing history, so to speak. How do we deal with contradictions of American values on one hand while recognizing the flaws? And since those sins who laid the groundwork for our beliefs today. Any comments about that? How talk about the problem of whitewashing history? Anybody? Okay, Sue, you got a comment?
We can't hear
I
Sue.
can hear you, Sue.
That's not a whitewash of history. At least not in my opinion.
Oh, I guess I'm talking here. I was going to talk about the vote.
Okay, go for it. Yeah.
Well, it just the idea that the colonies, states at that point, being governed by the king and the parliament 3,000 miles away, just did not make sense. And I think the idea of establishing a new nation when you had the opportunity was something that just couldn't be passed up, irrespective of all the other issues that have gone on. Presumably, you're protected, but how much protection are you going to get from 3,000 miles away? So I think it was a pragmatic move to declare independence.
Okay, so another controversial topic that was brought up when the show opened on Broadway, and of course the movie, was the fact that it's a musical. Should this story be told as a musical, or should it be a straight play? Anybody have any comments on that?
Yeah, it's Cap.
It's Cap, okay.
This is Kathy Coleman.
Coleman,
Yeah,
yes.
Hi, Bob. No, I think it's absolutely wonderful the way it was produced, and turning it into a straight play without adding the funny anecdotal pieces would have really destroyed it. And it would have been perhaps a downer. Instead, it provided levity and a different frame of reference while still adding a lot of serious things that were thought provoking and needed to be said.
Yeah.
Okay, some other comments about should this be a musical or should it be a straight play?
I know
Deborah?
there's at least one person in the audience tonight who does not think this should have been a musical because he told me that, but I won't tell you his name. He needs to step forward.
Okay, step forward, whoever that is that you don't want your name mentioned. In the meantime,
Let's see who that rascal is.
That sentence actually applies to me, but I don't know if I'm the person Bill is outing. There may be many of us. I really appreciated this musical. I had never, again, I haven't seen anything that we've got to enjoy in this series.
Dan, could you please stop? Somebody needs to mute their. I think Judy and Bruce are talking back and forth, and they need to be muted if they're going to do that, because it interferes with me hearing from Daniel.
Well, all right. So back to Daniel.
Well,
Once again, you have a great backdrop there, Daniel. Really love it.
thanks. I got pulled my favorite black and white photo from the piece. Maybe I need to watch this musical every year like some of our friends do, or put on that wonderful headdress that Debbie has to appreciate why this is a musical. Because for me, and for Chrissy too, who would agree with this, we didn't think the songs were particularly catchy or memorable. We didn't feel that always the songs advanced the action the way in the best musicals they do. Didn't think it was essential to the storytelling, although I concede Kathleen's point that there were some certainly charming moments in them. I think the Cool, Cool Men number was probably my favorite, other than the opening number in the piece. But I really didn't feel that it was essential, the musicality in the telling of the story. And I thought it maybe even the most compelling moments were the ones that didn't have music in them, which in any great musical, I don't think you want to walk away saying the most compelling moments in the musical are the ones without song. But that's really how I felt about it. Still, I appreciated it. I love the performance. I love being able to see great stage actors doing their roles, like you get to see in Music Man. Meredith Wilson's Music Man is perhaps an example of that. But when you get to see so many great actors doing their roles, I appreciate it. I didn't feel that the aesthetic of the early 70s cinematography held up particularly well. I thought that there's been movies we've seen even from the 40s in this series that held up better from a cinematography perspective. But all those things being said, I think it's well worth seeing, and I'm grateful to have been exposed to this piece.
Okay, Deborah has a comment. Thank you. Deborah?
Yes, I do have a few comments. First of all, in terms of whitewashing history, I think that, so I did want to point out that the vote for independence did not ride on the removal of that clause. The vote for independence took place on July 2nd, and only after that did they start discussing the Declaration.
Right.
So nothing actually rode on that clause. That said, it was a huge, huge issue, but that was the time when the Northern abolition movement was really just getting started. And in fact, what the slave clause was complaining about was the fact that the British were, inciting their slaves to revolt or to leave, because the British were saying that they would offer the slaves freedom. So it's not as clear cut as the movie or the play would like us to believe. And I think that that's a kind of a whitewashing. But I think that insofar as it gives the opportunity to do the Triangle Trade song, which for me is the most important part of the musical. That's truth. It doesn't go far enough, but at least it's in the right direction.
Yeah, Deborah, can we ask you? Thank you for all of that. Are you a historian?
No, but I have belonged to the URI Committee for the Commemoration and Study of Slavery in Rhode Island since its inception 4 years ago, and I have been reading about slavery in Rhode Island for at least 5 years now. So I'm pretty familiar with the whitewashing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, Blanche has got a comment. Blanche? Maybe her mic's not. Blanche?
Sorry, I had to find the unmute button.
There she is.
Hi, Daniel. I know you've never written a musical. You've written lots of great plays, though. I find that there are several songs in this that move me to not only tears, but hysterics. So I got to disagree with you. I think it was very brave of them to write as much as a half an hour without a song. That's totally unusual, as Bill mentioned. But Triangle Trade, Mama Look Sharp, the ones between John Adams and Abigail Adams just moved me to tears. And Cool, Considerate Men dropped my jaw in this time when we watched it this week. I always say, how did they know when was this written, Bill?
1969.
69, that this was still going to be the junk we're dealing with. So, while I respect and love what you do, Daniel, you're over here in my computer. I have to completely disagree. I think these songs are brilliant, and it's amazing to me that this man had these songs in him, and that was it. And yet, I've seen this on stage any number of times, including on Broadway, at Beck Center, at Near West Theater, which did a remarkably gender and age and race neutral production a couple of years ago. The songs are completely brilliant.
So, and I want to add, because I'm looking at some comments that are coming in on the chat. Bob and I love it when there's disagreement, as there just was between Daniel and Blanche. And our friend Jan Roberts says she loved the stage show, but the beginning of the movie, which is Sit Down, John, basically that's the opening number, the beginning was so silly, I almost turned it off. So,
no, sorry, Bill.
Oh, did I misquote you? I'm sorry.
You didn't. I didn't realize it wasn't the opening song. The one I objected to was the lead guy on his horse riding around the garden. I thought that was so stupid. I thought, I can't watch the rest of it. And also, I must say, the ones about Thomas Jefferson and his wife, I mean, all of that stuff, I thought it was just so silly. It really turned me off.
Yeah,
the reason for that over-the-top song is with Peter Stone, the librettist, and also the composer. They needed a song because they knew for the next half hour, 35 minutes, there's not going to be any singing at all, and they really wanted to get the audience really into the experience of the film, and also they did it on Broadway too. That was the reason why that song was over the top.
And they wanted a lot of adverbs.
Pardon me?
They wanted a lot of adverbs.
Yeah, that was the cute part of it. And yeah. Deborah, I want to come back to you because you've given us the most precise assessment of the piece in terms of history, and the criticism that you made, very fair criticism, has also been leveled against Hamilton, as you may know. And Lin-Manuel Miranda, who wrote Hamilton, and won a Pulitzer Prize along the way, describes Hamilton as historical fiction. Historical fiction. I think that's a really good term, and it applies to both of these shows. And so let's talk about that for a minute, because one of you wrote me an email this week and noted that I had sort of called 1776 and Hamilton sort of bookend musicals or companion pieces. And she didn't understand why I would do that, since Hamilton treats Thomas Jefferson and and I think John Adams with almost with ridicule. But do you guys? How would you compare? How would you compare the pieces? Do you agree with me that they're compatible, that they're bookends in a certain kind of way?
Anybody have any comments? Ross has a comment. Ross?
Yeah, well, I think that Lin-Manuel Miranda would say that, because I think he paid some tribute to 1776, and one of the lines, and I can't remember which one it was. Yeah. But I know there was one line in Hamilton at least that paid tribute to 1776, and then I remember there was an interview when he welcomed William Daniels to the stage at Hamilton, and they did a nice interview together, the two of them. And so I think Miranda would say yes, and in probably more ways than I'm thinking. So,
and I mean, what's so cool, I think all of us could agree, is that 1776 written in 1969, but here we're watching it 50 years later, and as Blanche pointed out, we're still dealing with many of the same issues 50 years later. And Hamilton, first produced in 2015, very much a product of its time. So both of the pieces very contemporary when they were written, but they have the qualities that say to us they're classic in one way or another, and they're going to stay with us, both of those pieces.
Jody has a comment.
I would say they're companion pieces.
Jody, your comment? Jody? You have your.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sorry. I was just saying that in Hamilton, there is that reference to "Sit down, John."
That's right.
And they have that moment where he does that. I mean, I think for me, the thing that both of the musicals do beautifully is that it gives you a little bit of, and that's the power of art. It gives you the human aspect of these people. They try to breathe real life into them. And so you think, wow, I mean, in Hamilton, you're just so aware that some of our founding fathers were so young, and they were the ones who started it, and they were just kids. And, I think in some ways 1776 does the same thing about just the audacity of them standing up and putting a vision out on the table and going against so many odds. And both of that is pretty powerful.
So, and Jody, when you use the word vision, which clearly applies to both Jefferson and Adams and to others in the Second Continental Congress, what do you all think about sort of vision as it applies to 2020? What would Jefferson and Adams want us to be doing now?
Anybody? Anybody?
I said voting.
Voting. Okay.
Well, I mean, I think the other thing that they both do really well, I'm sorry, is they talk about the opening line of, you put it together in Congress, and this Congress, like our political system, as well conceived as it is, isn't working for a lot of people. And certainly, that idea of what does liberty and freedom mean is very different today for a lot of people, and we still haven't lived up to those values or ideals. And I think there's a second revolution that people are saying it's time. It is time.
Yeah.
Deborah has a comment. Deborah?
Yeah, I think that they were much more literate. At least the men especially were much more literate. They read more of their population read daily newspapers. The whole reason for the post office was to get news out. And I think their message to us is that we should be better informed. I think they would be appalled at the acceptance of, the lies and the lack of education.
Yeah. Deborah, you said earlier that, I think you were the one who said that molasses to rum was the most powerful moment for you in the score. And I think you commented that it didn't even go far enough. How much farther do you think it really should have gone, that song?
I don't think that the song could have gone any further, but the fact is that the entire economy, not just the slave traders making their money, but the people who were, creating the casks that held the molasses or the rum going out, all the distilleries,
Yeah.
all of the farms that were sending the produce and stuff down to the West Indies because all of their acreage had to be spent on sugar, so they literally didn't have their own food. Every aspect of the economy throughout the colony. I know Rhode Island was the worst, but throughout the colonies, it was all so tied into slavery that we really have to reckon with that before we can understand the deep racism that is dividing us.
Yeah, indeed.
It's continuing this inequity continues to challenge us with white privilege and systematic injustices, and we're sort of living on eggshells. So it's a problem we dealt with back then. We're still dealing with it, which is kind of amazing. Dave has a comment.
Before we get to Dave, Joanna wrote me a chat here in capital letters that Paul Holland has been trying to talk for a long while. So, Paul, have we done justice to you yet?
Oh, you've been fine. There were a couple comments earlier on, but some of them right now I'll bring up in a little bit. Because they're a little bit to the side of what we're discussing at this juncture. So, but yeah, I did have my hand up a few moments ago, but I didn't mind. Other folks had great contributions. So,
okay, good. I'm glad. Okay. I didn't want you to feel disappointed.
Okay,
not a bit.
We go to Dave. Oh, you have another comment, Paul? No. Okay, Dave.
Yeah, two quick things. In answer to what would the founding fathers think about today, I think that their language about a more perfect union is still very, very relevant, and perhaps more so now than ever. That their thought was that it would be a project, an ongoing project that we have yet to fulfill. I mean, when you think about it, France and England and Germany, in terms of their cultures, have been around for 1,000 or more years, and we've been, really struggling for about 300 at best. And so we still have a lot of work to do to sort of grow up. The other point was I thought Deborah might have some interesting insights on a public radio story today that Rhode Island is trying to get rid of the term, the plantations from their official name, Rhode Island, and I can't remember what the full name is. Going to have
Deborah, you have to comment.
Yeah, here I am. Sorry, I had to unmute. Yes, so this is two different things. First, the Senate decided to put on the ballot to get rid of the full name of Rhode Island is Rhode Island and the state of Rhode Island and Providence Plantation. And the Senate voted to put it on the ballot that we take off the words and Providence Plantations. And the governor, without waiting for that, decided to take the and Providence Plantations off all official correspondence. And this is, so I don't know when, the state was, I don't know when it was a colony, when Roger Williams founded it, whether plantations were synonymous with slavery. However, I will say that Rhode Island had slaves, and there were plantations that had as many as 24 slaves doing the milking and doing, all of the farm work, actually where I live. So it is a sensitive topic, and hopefully it'll be on the ballot and people will change their minds, because it has been on the ballot before and they voted it down previously.
Yeah. I must take note of the fact that there are more of you chatting with each other tonight than Bob and I have ever seen before, which is so cool. And I'm just going to quote a little bit and see if the three of you who made this exchange would like to enlarge on it, because Debbie Schinker says this musical really shines a light on the complicity of the North and the support of the slave trade, to which Jody Maley Kirk responded, "It's all about economics." And John Schinker then said, "That was later, though. That's from the preamble to the Constitution." Anybody want to comment on that little exchange among the three of them?
Well, since I was the one who brought it up, I think that I wasn't necessarily unaware that it was from the Constitution, but it was part of the ethos at the time to build a new country and to not, I mean, just, I think Franklin was the one who said, the sun on the back of Washington's chair either was a sunrise or a sunset, and it was depending upon what we did with it. So I think we're still sort of struggling with what we need to do with it. And I think that, the idea of a more perfect union persists today in a lot of our thoughts.
I will jump in just because I can't raise my hand as the host, if you allow me to make a comment that
this is our version of Abigail Adams, right?
Well, I am a daughter of the American Revolution, so this is a near and dear subject to my heart. But in these times when we are learning how, as white people, we are so fragile and unused to talking about race in our history, I think in the same way we are unused to talking about the complexities sometimes around the revolutionary period because we're Americans, rah, rah, we're on the right side of history. And I think this movie points out that we weren't all necessarily on the right side, depending on how you look at it. And even though, yes, we gained our independence, it came at a cost to a lot of other people in the country.
Yeah. This is something that you all have been talking about in one way or another, but I want to ask the question really explicitly because it seems pertinent to me. We're living at a time with a very pronounced political climate. There's no way around that. Living with what we're living with right now, how did that affect your experience of seeing this 1972 movie in 2020, through a 2020 lens?
Oh. Anybody?
I'll go in on that one. I found it unusually timely that in the song Mama Look Sharp, at that time the battles were fought nearby where you were, and he's singing to his mother. Right now, the battles are being fought on the streets in our own cities, with all the protesters. And also, that song just reduced me to tears because I thought of calling to his mother, which is exactly what George Floyd was doing when he was being killed.
Okay. Some other comments, Bruce? You have a comment?
No, that was for Judy.
Oh, Judy, you have a comment, Judy?
She just did.
Okay. Judy?
She did, Bob. She commented.
Oh,
Sorry,
she did comment. Okay.
I just made the comment in the chat that it's a 1972 movie about 1776, yet still so relevant.
Yeah.
Well, I would add that one of the things I enjoyed was seeing there was a moment when a couple of the senators, it might have been John Adams and somebody else, had like a cane. I don't want to call it a fight, but they were kind of whacking each other with their cane. And I had read that historically that was actually not an inaccuracy, that there was congressmen, and I talked to my dad who's on this call, talking about it was relatively recently historically that congressmen stopped bringing guns and weapons to Senate sessions. So things like that, when I think, man, they can't get along now. Well, they're not caning each other, but verbally they are in many ways. But that exchange, that was a moment I really appreciated in the piece.
Yeah, and that was news to me, Daniel, I have to say. But it's historically accurate that they had stick fights in the middle of those debates, and that's how that was the way they did it.
It's amazing that this country. When I was looking at the beginning, obviously, spoiler alert, that we're a country, but. You're watching this and thinking, how are they going to get everyone to agree on this? How is this going to come together if you're not a historian? And all the fighting and all the all those moments, man, it's a miracle that this thing ever actually came together in that sense.
It is. And Daniel, I would even add, it's a miracle this got produced as a Broadway musical 51 years ago. Whether you think it should have been a musical or a play, it's miraculous that it got done, and ran for more than 1,200 performances and then got made into a movie. And Bob, I know you wanted to say something about the director of this movie,
Yeah.
Peter Hunt.
Yeah, I wanted to say something like,
better known.
Yeah, Daniel mentioned how static the movie is and how 70s or whatever, standard motion pictures basically at the time. Part of it was that Peter H. Hunt never directed a movie before. He was known as a lighting designer in New York, who even the fact that he directed the musical version was kind of amazing. But some circumstances, pretty much everybody said, no, this was a stupid idea. So he got it by process of elimination. And he did such a great job that Jekyll Warner, who believed back then, he was 80 years old, he was kicked out of Warner Brothers by his brother, and he was an independent producer. And he always felt that he got stung by My Fair Lady, by not having Julie Andrews play the lead. So he was determined, and if he ever did another musical, he would try to do the original cast as much as possible, and he would even pick the original director to direct it, to make sure that it comes together. And so Peter H. Hunt, what he did that's kind of amazing that you have to appreciate is that most of it was static, it was in a studio. It had to be faithful to the original Broadway production, which means it's stage-oriented. But yet he's able to keep the story going. Pacing was really pretty good for this static film. And he did an excellent job. And what he did was Act One, if you noticed, as a former lighting designer, was pretty well lit more for musical comedy. And there was a certain pace that was a little bit different. The second part of the thing, the musical, when it gets a lot more serious, he also throws in, as you notice from that song about the slaves, theatrical lighting. Totally. The way everything was lit in that scene and other scenes where it was now serious. And what he was able to do also, and with a big cast like this on the stage, he was able to keep highlighting Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Ben Franklin, the entire movie. If you watch it closely, he was able to keep them in focus basically the entire movie. So I think what he did was, quite extraordinary, that he was able to tell this story that he knew he was told to do it as faithful to the Broadway play as possible, and pull this off. I think in 40 days, 40 days they filmed this thing. And since he had the original Broadway cast, a lot of the scenes were just one take. But remember, most of these takes is not just one person, it's a big cast in the background. And he was able to pull that off. And of course, have the lighting, just the way that we can see people. And he created, I think, a little claustrophobia, in that he sort of wanted. So I give him a lot of credit. He went on to direct such movies as Baywatch. So his career was never as a major director, but he's the uncle of Helen Hunt, by the way, which is interesting. And what's also interesting is the Yale connection. The guy that Peter Hunt was from Yale. So was the guy that played Thomas Jefferson, who also went to Kent State University, by the way, was from Yale. So was the Peter Stone was from Yale, and there are a few other people who were there from Yale. These were old friends, and they sort of cast each other, by the way, knowing each other. I mean, it just goes back to that. To remember, this was not cast for stars. It was cast for contacts and also experience, and also people that did the Broadway version, so that they can put this movie together at a pretty low budget. So that's my thoughts on that.
Bob and I had decided that we were not going to go into too much, showbiz trivia tonight, because there's so much substance in this piece. But I got a really interesting email the other day that I shared with Bob from Judith Dakin, who used to manage Music Carnival. Remember Music Carnival? And went on to fame as the executive director of the Encores series of musicals in New York. And Bob, just report on what Judith told you, because when Encores in New York did 1776, about 10 years ago, William Daniels came to see it. And they did a Q&A with William Daniels, who's now 93, I think. And what Judith had to say about William Daniels.
Well, bottom line, he's a great actor and a great person, supposedly. I've heard people that have known him. He's also known for being one of the few television personalities that did 2 TV series at the same time. You might remember him St. Elsewhere, and he was also the voice of My Mother the Car. Okay, so he was pretty versatile. Well, the bottom line with him is that he did the Broadway production, and he did most of the performances for years as the lead as John Adams. And the big question that Judy asked him was about his voice. How could he? Because he talks almost the entire length of the show.
And is on stage.
He's on stage, and he's singing loud and he's shouting. How did he do that? Well, he had to get vocal assistants constantly going, and he couldn't talk much when he wasn't on camera or on stage. And he had to just watch his voice and had a therapist work with his voice so he can pull off that incredible part. Incredible part.
Yeah, it's a tour de force role, that's for sure. We don't want to overstay our welcome. Let's take 2 more questions or comments. Anybody? This is always then when no one says anything.
Herb's got a comment. Herbert, go on.
Am I on right now?
Yep, you're on right now.
I was going to comment how the guy who did the words and music, Sherman Edwards, I was amazed that he did a good job on both. And there's not that many people that do lyrics and that do the music. And yet you said in your introduction that was all he ever did. He gave up after 1776.
Yeah.
Any beginning?
Well, it wasn't really that he gave up. Maybe I wasn't clear, but the point I was trying to make was he spent 10 years of his life on writing the music and lyrics for the show, and there was really something he wanted to say. And after he said it, he just was not driven anymore to write another Broadway musical. But he had also been a pop songwriter as well. So I just don't know him by name. I think that Blanche, who made a comment in the chat, absolutely right. No stars in this musical, but some grand character actors. They're basically all character actors, instead of leading men, leading women. And there was John Schinker has had his hand up for a while now. So we recognize John.
Okay.
And Jody has. Oh, did we get John? Are you there, John?
John?
No.
Okay, we go to Deborah.
I was apparently muted by someone else. So, one of the things that made me laugh the first time I saw this show is the weather report. And I don't know if this was done intentionally or not, but this whole show takes place in a real place. And unlike all of the other movies that we've talked about, this is a real room in a real building. And I'm sure many of the other people in this conversation have been in that room. And if you walk in the main front door of Independence Hall and turn left, this is the room that's there. And so when Jefferson goes to the window to give the weather report, that window is on the north side of the building. So when he says wind from the southwest for the rest of the day, he's indicating that the wind is coming out of the room so that all of the wind is being generated by the people in the room. I don't know if that was intentionally done, but in every production I've ever seen, it's always done upstage right. It's always the same window. It's in the northeast part of the room. And so the geometry of that always holds. And so it always makes me laugh, even if it wasn't an intentional joke.
Yeah.
I'm out of the
Only you would notice that, John. That's great. One more little piece of showbiz trivia, because this really is cool. As Bob has indicated, almost the entire Broadway cast was used for the film, and many of them had never done a film before. But there was one significant cast change. Do you guys know who originally played Martha Jefferson? Oh, yeah, Joanna does. You want to say it, Joanna?
Come on, Joanna.
Yeah. Betty Buckley pre-Cats. Betty Buckley.
Yeah.
And Blythe Danner did the movie, and of course, at the same time, she was pregnant with Gwyneth Paltrow. So I guess Gwyneth sort of has a cameo in this thing.
There you go.
And so one of the person has a cameo, and I'm not making this up. Arnold the pig from Green Acres. It was in the movie. If you saw the pig, that is the Arnold the pig. I guess part of the deal with Arnold the pig, and I remember I heard this before years ago, had to have air-conditioned car at all times whenever he was being transported. So they had a limo, an air-conditioned limo on the set, so that Arnold would come out, do a scene, and then go back.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, true story.
No one knows more showbiz trivia than Bob Knoll. I just have to say that.
No.
And a segue out of trivia and into something dead serious and so well stated. Jody Maley Kirk made this comment in chat, quoting from the last song in the piece, which of course is anybody there? Does anybody care? Does anybody see what I see? And that's John Adams' song. And Jody writes, is anybody there? That is the question that haunts me. Are we listening? I would close it there, except there are a few more things that we just have to do. So let's do them. Here they come. There are three of them. And boy, wasn't this a good conversation tonight?
What? Very good.
You guys were great. Bob Knoll, tell us about the next movie.
Okay, the next movie is Top Hat with Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers and songs by Irving Berlin. Great story, great, just a fun musical. I think you'll really enjoy it. And that'll be premiering with our Q&A section will be in 2 weeks on July 10th.
And then number two of these three things, don't forget our survey for tonight. We're going to include a link in the chat area. You'll find it there right now. And we really do want to hear your suggestions for this series as we continue to work on it and what movies you would like us to highlight, et cetera, et cetera. And number three, it just so happens that next Tuesday is the end of our fiscal year. So that means you've got 4 more days in case you enjoyed this evening so much that you would like to make a donation to the Musical Theater Project. As you know, the pandemic has taken a financial toll on all arts organizations around the country, and that certainly includes the Musical Theater Project. And we thank you for donating any amount that is meaningful to you. Okay, number three, it's time to quote a lyric from a song that relates to the movie that you saw over the last week. And I thought it might be fun to actually quote one of Lin-Manuel Miranda's lyrics from Hamilton, since you'll all be seeing it on July 3rd on Disney+. And this is at the very end of the show. Actually, it's just before Hamilton is shot, and he sings Legacy. What is a legacy? It's planting seeds in a garden you never get to see. I wrote some notes at the beginning of a song someone will sing for me. You let me make a difference, a place where even orphan immigrants can leave their fingerprints and rise up. I'm running out of time. I'm running, and my time's up. Wise up, eyes up. Very powerful. Written in 2015. And we're going to give the last word to Peter Stone, who wrote the script for 1776. And as you heard me say in the intro, Lin-Manuel Miranda thinks that the script for 1776 just may be the finest script ever written for an American musical. High praise indeed. Peter Stone writes at the end of the published edition of this show, and here's something we can think about tonight. The United States owes its citizens, at the very least, an educational system that describes, defines, and explains our own existence. Hear, hear. So, we are officially adjourned. However, you know what? We have learned that some of you like to just stay and hang out with us a while longer. So Bob and I are going to remain on screen and chatting, along with Debbie Schinker and Heidi Lang and Joanna May Cullinan. We'll be here as long as you want to be here. And we want to thank you so much for spending the last hour with us, because it was a terrific hour. And from all of us at the Musical Theater Project, good night. Happy 4th of July, especially from John Adams and Alexander Hamilton. Thanks so much.